Okay, so today we're going to have a look at a book called Original Magic by Stephen E. Flowers. Now, most of you know who Stephen is. He's a well-known author that also goes by a lot of other pseudonyms. You know, this is a very interesting and unique book because it details the practices of the Magi and Zoroaster, as he was known in Greek, or Zarathustra, the original Persian term for his name. Now, Zoroaster or Zarathustra, as he was known, is credited as being the originator, as far as we know, of magical practices and also astrology and those occult type sciences. Now, there is a difference between magic and sorcery. So a lot of skeptics in the scientific world are often quoted as saying he couldn't have been the originator of magic because he was against sorcery. Now, the terms and the modus operandi of magicians and magic and sorcerers are different. Okay, so we're looking at his art. And this is a very fascinating book because it details the history, the background information, and then details a modern plan of how to implement these practices for the layman like you and I. It's a fascinating book, so let's get into it, okay?
Okay, well, hello again, and today, as mentioned, we're going to have a look at Original Magic. This is a book written by Stephen E. Flowers on Zarathustra's magical lineage, also known as Zoroaster in Greek. This was a very powerful spiritual practice that is probably the forerunner of magical practice worldwide. Now, this is a groundbreaking book because it details, of course, the history. You have to know a little bit, and it's not boring. It's very interesting and very necessary to know the roots of how all this came about. And it starts off with Chapter 1, Iranian magic, as the ancients saw it. Then he delves into Chapter 2, the history of Iranian magic. Number 3, we get into the theories of Mazdan magic, as it was known. Chapter 4 is when you actually start really getting into the meat and potatoes of the magical and spiritual practices. It is initiation into magic, and it outlines a 12-month plan of spiritual magical practice to really get into this very powerful and ancient magical practice and spiritual path. And chapter 5, it rounds off with the necessary rituals of Mazdan magic, how to perform the self-initiation ceremony if you cannot find a priest in the order, a magical mentor. But actually, if you go to his website, you'll be linked up fairly quickly. Now, let me read just some comments from other authors, the epitaphs about this groundbreaking book. Original Magic, a superbly written and detailed book providing an excellent practical guide and framework for modern practice. The book is divided into 4 distinctive and easy to follow sections. Covering history, theory, initiation and practices of the Persian Magi, making it a highly recommended read. Now, the Bible tells the story of the 3 Persian Magi following a star and bringing gifts of gold, frankincense, and myrrh for the baby Jesus. Okay? Possibly incorrectly so, because they arrived after he was born. If you read the Greek version, the original Greek, it was mistranslated. But who were they? They were actually real, famous, and renowned Magi. Who were they? and what made them wise men. So Stephen Flowers, PhD, explains the history of the Persian Magi and provides ample examples of the sources of their wisdom. Okay, that was written by Payam Nabaz, author of the Mysteries of Mithras. Okay, another one we have here from, I'm not sure how to pronounce the name, so I apologize. Sesiwer Sereth, author of The Pagan Family, Deep Ancestors, and a Book of Pagan Prayer. Okay, now, since the very word magic comes from ancient Persia, it is remarkable how much that tradition has been ignored by modern magicians and pagans. In this book, Stephen Flowers, PhD, fills that gap, using both his academic prowess and his magical experience to provide a workable system of magical initiation and training based on both the original sources and what can be reconstructed from modern Iranian practice. The result is a system that will bring about deep spiritual change in its practitioners. Okay? Alright, so more words of praise. Unlike works on esoteric praxis that seek to cultivate an air of mystification, Stephen Flowers' original magic allows the ancient and genuine tradition of Mazdan spirituality to reveal itself in radiant clarity. The result is a challenging but thoroughly workable curriculum for self-initiation into one of our oldest living religious and philosophical currents. Although it shares Indo-European roots with the more familiar pagan traditions of the West, the flame that fuels the Mazdan way has never been stifled or snuffed out by the vicissitudes of history. And in stark contrast to systems of sorcery based in a cynical paradigm, original magic offers more than just a path toward wisdom and betterment for the individual. Its goal is a truly enlightened world. Okay, those words of praise came from Michael Moynihan, PhD, co-editor of the journal Tur Myth, Culture, Tradition, and co-author of Lords of Chaos. Don Webb says, Stephen Flowers changed magical research and practice by bringing scholarship and actual practice into a complementary whole. Original magic will be a game changer in the esoteric and scholarly worlds. It returns magic to its roots and restores the original symbol of the mind as a flame. It is a most powerful work. Now I'm going to read off the preface and I'll add some commentary because I think it gives a very good outline. This book is on the magical practice of Zoroaster, called the Mazdan way. It's Mazdan magic, to be more accurate. So let's have a look at the preface by Stephen. Okay, so the word magic ultimately derives from the Indo-European root underlying the Iranian term magu, which denoted a priestly class of men schooled in and initiated into the arts and sciences of forging a salutary link between the supernal realm and the terrestrial world of events and phenomena. They were so skilled and famed for their effectiveness that the practices they engaged in came to mean what we today call magic. Unfortunately, much of their wisdom, for which they were also renowned, was lost along the way, at least as far as Western practitioners of magic were concerned. The original form of magic was aimed at individual self-development, initiation, and the application of the art and science of their particular craft toward the overall betterment of the world and of their particular craft, toward the overall betterment of the world and of individuals in the world. The ultimate aim of magic was individual and collective happiness. In the hands of the unwise, magic quickly devolves into sorcery, the unsystematic application of similar techniques for the alleviation of temporary emergency situations. Mazdans, both ancient and modern, both Eastern and Western, deplore sorcery, yet practice the most exalted form of magic. As I have noted, the very word magic is derived from their tradition. Okay, so magic comes from this tradition. For the ancient Iranians who belonged to the Indo-European family of cultures, there was little distinction between magic and religion. Theirs was a magical religion, and it remains so today. These ancient traditions are still very much kept alive among modern-day Zoroastrians. Once the world's single most influential religious community, Orthodox Zoroastrians now number fewer than 300,000 people scattered all over the world. There are, however, signs that the religion is making a comeback throughout the world. But this is not a book about the religion of Zoroastrianism. It is a book of magic and magical initiation to be used by individuals of various backgrounds. Okay, so Stephen actually wrote another book which precedes this one called The Good Religion back in 2014, which outlines the religious practices. This book outlines in details the magical practices, and this is what interests and is of interest to us. Okay, so chapter 1 starts off Iranian magic as the ancients saw it. So the Iranian prophet Zoroaster, he lived as far back as 1700 BCE. So Zoroaster is the original Avestan form of his name, whereas the term and name Zoroaster derived from the Greek version of his name. He was a professional priest within the Iranian tradition, which shares a common root and great similarity to the Rigvedic tradition in India, which is still alive today. His prophetic insight revealed to him that there was but one true God. Now, this is important to note, not the only God, but one true God, meaning a God above the others. Identical with the principle of pure focused intelligence or consciousness. Now, according to a wide variety of sources, it was thought that the Persians and their prophet, Zoroaster, were the originators of magic, astrology, and even philosophy itself. So this section will explore these opinions and legends, that both internal and external from various sources. It's very interesting. So this is the beginning of it all. I recommend reading it because you'll get a really good background of how it all came about, and how this craft became then the original source of all magic, and what it means to us now. In chapter 2, Stephen discusses the history of Iranian magic, and once again this is very, very interesting to study and read. So in this chapter he explores the actual history of Iranian magic as various people, including himself, were able to reconstruct it from internal sources and also comparative evidence that is available. Now magic, like the closely related traditions of religion, is an evolving thing, he states. So certain principles and features remain as constraints, while other aspects change their value. Specific practices may become emphasized or de-emphasized over time. Some of these differences are the result of social changes in the culture. For example, when a highly developed priest class is present, rites and rituals tend to become very complex and require great expense to the celebrants to enact them. So an overview of the history of Mazdan magic reveals 5 distinct phases. Okay, and he goes about and details all of them. So phase 1 is the pre-Zoroastrian. Phase 2 was the early Zoroastrian. Phase 3 is called the Sasanian. Phase 4 was the post-Muslim, and 5 is the modern. And here we are only concerned with the high Mazdan magic, not mere sorcery in this modern phase. Okay, so once again it's a very interesting chapter to read. It really explains everything. The earliest period of Iranian magic, he states, which were most likely very similar to the earliest phase of Vedic magic in India. And one of the reasons why it is difficult to determine the exact nature of pre-Zoroastrian mythology is because all of our sources stem from the time after Zarathustra. Anyway, talks about all the gods and the developments of Mithra and the richness and understanding of the philosophical level of the Magian tradition, and also the reform of Zoroastrian magic, which is more a reinterpretation of the tradition rather than an overthrow of it. Also in chapter 2 he discusses the theory of Iranian magic and Mazdan magic, the words, the actions, the early Zoroastrian age, theology, mythology, all about creation, second attack by evil, the origin and nature of humanity, myths of the end, ritual, the hymns, which are called mantras in Mazdan magic, actions, astrology theory, the divinatory uses, operative uses, the transformations that occurred with the Muslims, and the topology of Mazdan magic, and then action. Okay, chapter 3 is about the theories of Mazdan magic. So here on in, the purpose and aims of magic in all cultures and at all times can be summarized with a few terms: wisdom, success, well-being, and happiness, or more concisely, wisdom, power, and pleasure. The original magic of the Mazdans and Magians provided all of these because they were the things that the wise Lord intended for humans to have. When man has these things, the endeavors are thwarted, and the time of making wonderful is drawn closer. So, in this chapter, Stephen will address issues of the structure and nature of the world and of the individual human being, as well as the theories and basic operating principles by which magic works in the Mazdan tradition. Now, the reason why it is important to understand the nature of the world and of the individual is that the magician, as an individual, must know his or her instrument, the self, so it can be more readily developed and put into action. The field of that action is the greater world or cosmos. Having a map of both the self and the world and learning that map well is a cornerstone to effective magical operations. Okay, so this is a key chapter as well because, like just previously stated, as I read from the beginning of chapter 3, it gives a foundation and the roadmap that you really need to make magic effective. Now, once you have a solid understanding and the foundational base of the principles of Mazdan magic, which were outlined in the previous chapters, we come to chapter 4, and this is where the meat and potatoes start to come into play. The actual practice, the how-tos of Mazdan Zoroastrian magical practice are outlined here. So, chapter 4 is called Initiation into Magic, and he states, for magic to work, the practitioner must first be transformed or initiated. Without this transformation, the practice is empty hocus pocus. Okay? Now, this may offend quite a few people, but I'm going to say it because if you really examine it truthfully, these words will resonate. A lot of these so-called occultists that we see today, these neo-pagans, are basically practicing empty hocus pocus. They want a quick fix like a McDonald's, and they'll just click on any link, read any book, follow any advice without really researching it or without going into the finer aspects of refining oneself through and transforming through a form of initiation, even self-initiation, and then they believe they are amazing magicians affecting the world, and then they get attracted to the darker arts and believe they have real power, which in actual fact, they're just empty. They're just doing procedures and movements with virtually almost no effect. Or sometimes if it does work, then they start to believe they are truly empowered, and they just continue in a deluded fashion, creating more mayhem than anything constructive to actually help them progress in any way. Anyway, I have gone off on a tangent there, so let's get back to this. So in this chapter you will find the basics of how to transform yourself into a plausible magician or practitioner of operative Zoroastrian theology. As we have learned, original magic is a form of symbolic communication between the human and divine worlds, between Getig and Menog. Okay, they are the Avestan terms. One of the basic symbolic languages of Zoroastrian teachings is that of the Yazatas, as understood within the calendrical or astrological system. The task of learning this meta-language involves internalizing the meanings of the yazatas and mantras associated with each of them, and the general formulaic keys to the ritual thoughts, words, and actions. Once the system has been interiorized, the other rituals of magical technology will become effective. This section teaches a 12-month curriculum for completing this vital process. The Ashem Vahu and the Ahunva, which are the basic mantras used in every ritual, are presented with commentary in Appendix C. And you'll find a lot of very useful extras and rituals and add-ons in the appendices. So this is where the meat and potatoes really starts. He outlines an excellent 12-month curriculum. I had a look through it. And as this is a new book, I haven't actually put it into full practice yet because I've only had this book for 4 days, but it looks fantastic, really interesting. So chapter 4 is amazing. It's an amazing read. It's fantastic. And let's now get into chapter 5. Okay, chapter 5 is all about rituals of Mazdan magic. Alright, so these are the advanced rituals and the long form series of magical operations. This is really where you get into the heavy lifting, so to speak. So, in this chapter, Stephen presents a series of rituals and magical operations. These rituals exist either as whole workings unto themselves or as frameworks within which individual workings can take place. Alright, so the keys are really handed to you in this chapter. In the course of training, outlined in chapter 4, you will have learned the most basic form of magical ritual in the Mazdan practice. Here we will consider some traditional ways in which this format can be expanded and tailored to individual needs. Okay, so this is where you learn the long form methods and the real you can do the heavy lifting here, and then you can adapt it and apply it to your own individualized, customized practices as well. You learn the formula. It is necessary to say a few words about the use of various languages during ritual. It is possible to perform the rituals of original magic using English only. However, results will not be as forceful as could be expected with the use of the sacred mantras in Avestan and the use of Pahlavi in certain set formulas. In general, it can be said that the Avestan mantras and the Pahlavi formulas fuel the fire and open the gateway to the realm of Menog, thus making the specific working of the individual will more effective. The old sacred languages are magical vehicles for the transmission of the will of the Fravashi from the soul to the upper creative realms in Menog. You'll learn the terminologies, what this means, when you read the book. Everything's outlined. Avestan mantras are to be spoken aloud in a clear and ringing voice. The Pahlavi formulas are recited in a lower voice, while English words are to be whispered and or merely thought. An important difference between most rituals of a purely religious nature and those of a magical one is that it is extremely important for the mind and will of the magician to be fully engaged and in sync with the operating mechanism of the realms of Manog and Getig for the ritual to work. When performing the opening segment of the ritual, it is sometimes necessary to repeat the rites and mantras several times until the magician feels that certain something, that special feeling, which tells him or her that the gate is open and the channel of communication has to be established. Alright, this is very important, and you may have seen an old video that I made on the lesser banishing ritual, or the lesser ritual of the pentagram, both forms, where I do the same thing. You are repeating the names in the course several times, not just once, until you feel it's just right. Okay, so this is very interesting that Stephen emphasizes that point here. I totally concur, totally agree. Now, this perception will have already been felt many times in the process of training and doing the daily work of individual initiation, so you'll know when this moment is happening for you. Alright, so he details the operating environment, the environment in which the magical work takes place, how important it is, the space where you'll be practicing, your setup, everything is outlined here, daily ritual, and he goes into the full 12-month curriculum. Alright, so if you are really interested in powering up your spiritual and magical practices and link yourself up to the Mazdan magical current that goes back to Zoroaster, to really power charge your magic and transform yourself spiritually in magic, to fully enforce the true effects of the will, then get this book. It is excellent. It looks really good. I'm excited to really dive deeper into it and put these practices into use and make a practice out of it. You would be interested in getting the book that I mentioned previously that he wrote on the religious aspects of the Mazdan practice, if you're really interested in the entire whole system. But if not, you just want to do the magical practices as a modern magician, then definitely get this book. Okay, I cannot recommend it highly enough if you want to do practical magic that sources the most ancient and deepest roots of a system that was, so, and still is extremely powerful and effective. Then get this book, Original Magic by Stephen E. Flowers. Now, as an end note, Stephen does state that this is a book, for example, like the 9 Doors of Midgard, that is meant to be studied and lived with, not merely read. It is a spiritual companion. It is a reflection of work that should be undertaken on a daily basis for 1 year solid without break. And this would make it the most effective magical practice, most likely, that you've ever undertaken. So there's the challenge to you. You may also like to join the Facebook group called Occidental Temple of the Wise Lord. If you can't find it, then go to Stephen Flowers' Facebook page and scroll through to the Original Magic mention. The other resource, which I found really good, was the MP3, called MP3s actually. It's a series of MP3s on the Mazdan mantras and meditations. So here you will hear how to pronounce, and you can join in the singing and the music of the actual Mazdan mantras and meditations, so you get it right, so you get the correct pronunciations. It's powerfully done, and it's a really good add-on. It complements the book really well. So with all those resources, you are set to go. Okay, it's an exciting book on an exciting topic of original magic. So there you have it, the review of Original Magic by Stephen E. Flowers. It's an amazing book, once again. Well, I hope you enjoyed that quick review. Definitely, it is one of the better books that I have read on any topic in magic for quite some time. I'm completely satisfied with this purchase, and it is an invaluable resource. So I really look forward to getting stuck into all the rituals and magical principles outlined in this fantastic text. Okay, so that's all from me. Hope to see you again sometime soon in the future. So have a great day or great weekend or great week ahead. Look forward to seeing you guys again soon. Okay? Cheers.